Hello. My name is Sarah M. Holland, and this is my video application for the Next Generation Leadership Initiative. Question 1. How has God called me to 1. The ministry, 2. The parish, and 3. The United Church of Christ? Arguably, I've landed quite happily in the family business. Both of my parents showed me God's love, justice, and peace as I grew into my youth and young adulthood. I can hear the words now. Don't fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. I grew up in the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church, a pastor's child. I love the service work, the worship, the singing. It was in this context that I found God's grace, even though I lost myself as a Southern church culture harmed my subconscious. Seeing and understanding what was often deemed as normal, I put myself inside a functional closet, which at the time did not feel so restrictive. Even while I was in that closet, the scripture my mom and dad had showed me, in word and in action, provided safe harbor to who I was at my core. The summer before my junior year of undergraduate studies, I finally found true peace in my faith walk, and much of my life truly started to fall into place. While I worked as a field coordinator at Carolina Cross Connection, I continued to find myself in service work. Carolina Cross Connection is a youth and adult outreach ministry that does minor home repairs for all types of marginalized people. I found peace in God's work, and I grew not only in my commitment to service, but in being more myself. I began to see God as that ultimate presence, the one who could lead people to care for those around them. At Carolina Cross Connection, God's Spirit came with clarity to me as we sang and we prayed in the outdoors. And then later, at the United Parish of Auburndale, I grew into my identity as a Christian leader. I started to self-identify as that leader in stronger ways. And I knew it wouldn't be easier for me, but a deeper call, one to life and to love. By this time, I had already clearly articulated my call to serve LGBTQ people, those who, of course, have been excluded from faith communities. While at United Parish of Auburndale, I began to feel a call to parish ministry. I saw my propensity to lead others in their spiritual journeys. I saw my call to advocate for many types of justice, including serving LGBTQ people. And I see that as something that connects me to the broader United Church of Christ. I would describe my call to Hingham Congregational as slow and steady, strong. Hingham Congregational Church is honest about their need for education around all things LGBTQ, and they respect what I offer the congregation on that and other topics that relate. They see my heart for ministry, and they identify the strongest parts of my service, those which glorify God. Hingham Congregational has supported my call to preach the word and also strongly encourages me to pray as much as possible. One of the parts of my ministry that I would call one of the strongest. The United Church of Christ calls people into faith with the historical Jesus and on journeys that have to do with connections and community. These connections I see as empowering. With Christ as the center, the UCC moves us towards God's heart with courage and with strength. We know that life may be hard, but that there is always more than we understand. And we're not called to make these moves towards God alone, but standing in solidarity as whole churches and in the world with our neighbors. We can find Christ in the places that we least expect. In my opinion, that sort of Christ-seeking is specific to the UCC, and it moves individuals and communities into the world with strength after worship services. This is not just about theology or talk about God, but about doing. The theologian Catherine Keller discusses action and ritual in contrast to theology. This is what she says: theological truth cannot be captured in propositions, no matter how correct. Our words may fall short of God's majesty, but action makes space for the divine. As God has called us by name, we may do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Question 2. The core purpose of my life. I will speak about my mission, or what I do. I play, I laugh, I cry, I write, I preach, I coach, I overdo, I drink coffee, I drink tea, I move forward in community. I play while at work and while away from work. I play not only because I have learned to play, but because playing sustains me. Whether on a soccer field, practicing stand-up comedy, waiting for a doctor's appointment, at a board meeting, or even giving a sermon, I play. I find that playing sustains me and the people I encounter. I consider it to be a part of my life's work, not just part of my call to ministry. I laugh while experiencing pain personally, or while having great joy with friends, family, or even the people I serve at Hingham Congregational. A part of me feared that I was trivializing faith when I would include bits of comedy in sermons, usually limited to 2 minutes or less at a time, of course. But my friend, who is a very faithful Christian, reminded me, joy is a part of faith, Sarah. And I replied, yeah, it is. I cry. I carry my emotions with me, and I work to keep from hiding them from the people I serve. People are empowered when they realize they have spaces that are safe to share their emotions. I believe that churches should be ready to offer space for tears. If faith leaders who set examples are so courageous as to cry, then followers may see that they have space to cry too. I write. I write as if my life depends upon it and as if other people's lives depend upon it. Whether I'm writing stand-up for a set, whether I'm writing a sermon, or writing just to feel a pen to paper, I write with the understanding that stories need to be told, that stories need to be heard. I preach as I have been called to preach. While some say I am new to parish ministry, I remember leading my youth group as an adolescent. And I remember planning programs for Fellowship of Christian Athletes during undergrad. I've always had a sense that I've been called to interpret God's word for today. I coach, knowing that the children and youth of the 21st century have been given play dates and schedules to the umpteenth degree. I coach in a way that I hope teaches children and youth that they can play on their own, which I think for many people leads to faith and wisdom. I overdo many things. This is part of who I am. I do not try to cut this part of myself out of life, but I try to adapt, knowing that I need to balance this part of me with adequate downtime and rest. I do believe that overdoing it can sometimes be of benefit to an individual or a community. Similar to how fasting can be beneficial. This would be feasting rather than fasting. I drink coffee a lot. I love coffee. I also love tea. Coffee gives me energy for all of these endeavors. Tea keeps me grounded and in good health. Both of these to me are social drinks that draw me to community. And in such community, I aim to move forward. Question 3. A biblical text and examples on how it calls me and my congregation to faithful and fruitful ministry. And Jesus said to them, "Go into all the world and proclaim the good news to the whole creation," from the 16th chapter of Mark. While there are so many important aspects of ministry, I do believe that many of them can be summed up in proclamation of the good news or the gospel. Witness comes in many forms, In our church, both youth and adults seem to be most moved by service inward and outward. Just 2 weeks ago, some children and youth worked with me and a couple of other adults to put together care packages for first-year college and university students. These sorts of simple actions are proclamation to people at Hingham Congregational. I'm often impressed by the ways that Hingham Congregational Church does not seem to feel the need to necessarily make a lot of noise about the fact that they are a church doing good works, often. For example, our church is one of the key organizations which puts together the town's annual Taste of Hingham. The money from that event is then dispersed directly to local agencies in need of money. Rather than aggressively broadcasting out our church's key role in this event, the leaders are extremely humble and simply do what they do. They want to bring the most money possible to these agencies that are in need. It's clear to me when the people of Hingham Congregational Church go into the world that they are called to action, looking to serve the people they encounter. This is a great profession of faithfulness, and it also seems to bring people into the fold of our community, especially if they feel unsure about being involved in a Christian community. Part of proclaiming the good news to all of creation is about moving to the social action, going out into the world. The church should serve as a vehicle for reconciliation. We hear this in Paul's letters. It's been my experience that this view I have of the gospel is met at Hingham Congregational Church, and that this aspect of spiritual journey or journeys is compelling for people to get and to stay involved. Question 4. What leadership lessons have proven valuable in my ministry? I've learned so many leadership lessons thanks to so many people in my life now and from years past. Playing soccer for my entire childhood and adolescence gave me innumerable opportunities to lead by example. And the older I grew, the more I saw that while speaking well to teammates definitely mattered, that offering a strong example mattered even more. In ministry and work settings, since undergraduate, I have needed to learn time and again that no one can please everyone. This has proven to be particularly important when working in churches, where there are so many people with so many opinions about what the minister should be doing. This lesson is one that I will have to keep in mind because of my personality. I, like many other ministers, like to make people happy. Alas, that is not always possible. Finally, many self-help books have added to leadership lessons for me and skills in ministry. 2 that stand out in my mind are The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, who is a spiritual guru, and a book called Less by Mark Lesser. The aptly named 4 Agreements focuses on how we should approach the world. Number 1, he names as to show up. Number 2, do your best. Number 3, be impeccable with your word. And number 4, check your assumptions, which I've simply reworded from his don't make assumptions. Because my church is an emailing church, it's critical for me not to get down on falling behind. I must remember to show up rather than to worry so much about email. I've always worked to do my best, though it's clear to me that in ministry, people are really paying attention to what you're doing. Therefore, it's even more important to do your best. People see authenticity, and this is people see authenticity, and this is why being impeccable with your word is so important. Finally, it's really easy to make assumptions. By checking assumptions, you're respecting people, and you're giving people space to be themselves. In Mark Lesser's book, Less, Accomplishing More by Doing Less, that's simply what he lays out, how we can get more done with doing less in our day. when I use that in my daily practice with a to-do list or a number of emails I check, I truly do find that I'm more successful in getting things done. It's just been valuable for me, especially as a leader. Question 5, spiritual practices. How do these engage and deepen my faith and nurture my resilience for ministry? This is my longest one, which I'm quite proud of, actually. I think that's a good sign for my ministry. There are many disciplines and practices that feed my ministry and life. I work really hard to integrate all aspects of my life, my work, and my play. By this, I mean I try to work very hard to work on things that feed me, not just working to work. Coaching is a great example. Coaching is fun. It's also decent money for a part-time job. And by connecting with children and youth in that way, I feel my innermost child being liberated. This is a great opportunity for play that touches many parts of the ministry I serve at Hingham Congregational Church. I do keep basic practices, or traditional practices. I keep a weekly Sabbath, mine's Tuesday, and I pray each morning. During my prayers, I lift up those close to me, those who have passed from my life, and those who struggle. While this is an independent and personal practice, I do feel it connecting me in an ecumenical way, as I lift up the Lord's Prayer as a part of the closing. I love exercise, the outdoors, and all games, including almost all sports. The older I get, the more I see each and every sport as appealing. For example, I've never had the opportunity to golf, though I would love to do so, as I see that sport as offering great meditative and social aspects. Soccer is one of my foundations, as well as hiking. Most recently, I've discovered backpacking. I splurged on good equipment last summer consciously. Backpacking in the wilderness is about disconnecting and connecting to earth. Furthermore, backpacking is a penny-wise preacher's form of fun, if you ask me. I enjoyed my 2 backpacking adventures last summer so much that I have a nascent and real dream of completing the Appalachian Trail with my first opportunity for sabbatical as a young or middle-aged minister. I also know that backpacking will be a spiritual practice which my partner and I can enjoy together. Similarly, she and I both enjoy yoga. I've done so much yoga in the past 12 months, in fact, that I'm considering using the year 2020 to become a registered yoga teacher. Yoga is indeed at the intersection of faith and sport. My most recent hobby that relates to ministry is my pursuing stand-up comedy. I was getting laughs frequently enough in sermons last year, in 2018, that I decided to apply for a scholarship at Improv Boston. My experience there has been groundbreaking. There's an important social and interpersonal element for me. The work and the play that stand-up pushes me to be a bit more of a night owl, which can be important for church meetings. Furthermore, my sweetie is a night owl. She's enjoyed coming to see what the scene is like, and also simply socializing. Finally, as I already stated, joy matters in ministry. If I can add but 6 laughs a year by going to stand-up classes and open mics, I will feel like the work and play of comedy has paid off. My engagement in comedy relates to another new facet of work and play, writing. I'm not a conventional writer. I am learning what type of writer I am, but I generally enjoy writing poetic prose, which is sometimes known as creative nonfiction. I'm working on a memoir based on my experience of coming out, going through a breakup, and coming to terms with identifying as a gender nonconforming lesbian. Writing is of course therapeutic, but it also opens up space for stories in sermons and in ministry. I stay busy. I have 2 more. Another recent discovery is film photography. I picked it up because I happen to be friends with the president of the Photographical Historical Society of New England. Last summer, when I saw Joel at his lake house, he noticed the camera I was using and the intention I had when taking photos. Subsequently, he showed me all these really interesting old cameras. I was enraptured, especially by the brownie-style ones. Thereafter, he and his family gifted me a restored dual lens style camera as well as a single lens style. For the past 3 weeks, I've been taking photos in manual mode with my Minolta XG1. I'm learning about aperture, f-stops, shutter speeds, and all that relates. I find photography with film to be quite life-giving and engaging in a way that digital photography is not for me. I have a spiritual director that I meet with about once every 2 months, as well as a therapist. Finally, time with my partner Libby deepens my faith greatly, and I'm grateful for all she and I can share. Further, because she's also in a helping profession, she's a social worker, she understands much of what I might experience after meeting with parishioners who are going through hard times. I do also enjoy spending time with family in North Carolina. I just don't get to see them that much because of the distance between Massachusetts and North Carolina. When I do see them, it is quite life-giving. I also have 2 cats who you may have heard at this point. I enjoy spending time with them. Question 6. What would it look like for a cohort of colleagues to encourage and challenge one another in ministry? A cohort would best encourage each person involved by first giving space for people to identify their own gifts for ministry. From my experience, people can easily help each other simply by reminding. For example, if I share with a friend one of my strengths is connecting in person rather than by writing an email, further down the road, they might encourage me to do just that, meet with people in person whenever possible. I also think a cohort might benefit from identifying strengths in some sort of an organic and experiential way, perhaps by just playing a few games and seeing which roles people adapt into. By doing this, people may see folks in action in that organic way so that then people may point to the strengths that they notice rather than just what the one individual may feel that they are good at. Similarly, I think a key area of challenge and encouragement may be simply calling to question areas that an individual may feel are areas for growth or areas that need improvement. This point may, in some situations, be more or less helpful, but also relates to another way to grow in a group, by checking assumptions. I do not think members of a cohort should give colleagues a false sense of ability, but help those on the same path get to the underlying reasons of why a certain professional area is one that constantly seems to need growth. From my view, a lot of this might relate to giving space for individual visioning in a group context. A group might even take time to info share ways of visioning. How does each person answer the question, why do you do what you do? A member of a cohort might then be able to see potential gaps in the way that they are approaching their vision and how that is affecting actions in the workplace. Finally, a critical part of challenging colleagues in such a group, as in clinical pastoral education, I would imagine, is by offering plenty of space to discuss assumptions, values, perceptions, lived experiences, and how each of these shape the role that a person takes on in ministry. I believe I'm now at time for my video application, or I must be close. Again, my name is Sarah M. Holland, and I finally want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I have found a cat, so I'm going to get her. Her name is Lucille. This is Lucille. She's a little shy. I hope to see you in the summer for a video interview or maybe even in person. Thanks again.